seeing as the chair is absent, I'll be filling in because I'm president pro tempore. So we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll take notes here very shortly. While we're doing it, okay. So we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so Senator Ali Isles. Present. Senator Colette King. Present. Senator Jackie Jacoby. Absent. Senator Traylon Bradley-Bowles. Senator Priscilla Bray. Present. Senator David Escobedo. Senator Reed Blake. Senator Herman Zinga. Marketing and Promotions Director. Vice President of Campus Internal Affairs, Fernando Echeverria.
Present.
Vice President of External Affairs, April Galvan.
Present.
Parliamentarian Momo Hussain. Absent. Senate Secretary Artelia Chokri. Michael Urban, absent. Executive Vice President. Vice President of Finance Iris J. Present. Myself. Elections Director Stephanie Rose. Present. Oh, President Nafi Karim, sorry. Absent. Outreach Director Jessica Urquidez. Here. Personnel Director Ashley Ferrano. Senator Christian Ardondo. Senator John Dell.
Present.
Senator Koenig. Absent. Senator Summer Schaefer. Present. And Senator Jason Ramirez.
Present.
And Senator Catherine Zika. Okay. So today we'll be discussing the executive order that was released yesterday. Dave, do you want to go ahead and speak about it?
Yeah, so before we begin, I want to talk about a few things that transpired since we found out about the executive order. So for those of you that don't know, the way that most of us found out about the executive order was hours after it was released exclusively to the Judicial Council and to only certain members of professional staff, as well as apparently certain outside individuals with no relationship to ASUCR, at least not, and especially not in an official capacity as the Senate or the Executive Cabinet. So what happened was, fortunately, some people have good enough conscience to understand that the President should not be releasing executive orders exclusively to certain members of ASUCR for which they benefit. But and so they sent that email to myself and others. And so at least we were able to find out about the executive order. As soon as we found out about the executive order, we understand that Senate has the authority to, in the same clause where it gives the President the authority to establish executive orders, it does give Senate the authority to override the executive orders with a majority vote. So first off, I want to begin also by talking about our meeting today. So we know that there's been a Judicial Council memo, I'll call it a memo since it's not an official document, sent out by Judicial Council this morning suggesting that we don't meet. I say suggestion because I also don't think that it has authority to give weight. First off, I want to address the issues that they talk about in that. So it says that there has to be 48 hours for an official meeting. It's clear from the Constitution that that's referring to regular meetings of the Senate. It would be illogical for that part of the Constitution to apply to emergency Senate meetings that can be called under the executive vice president in the Constitution. Otherwise, the Senate would be crippled in being able to do any work in an emergency capacity. Also, I would question really strongly why Justice Daniel Ojo was able to vote in that decision, seeing as how this is a case directly relating to him being reinstated on the Judicial Council. At the very least, ethic and morals and the very understanding of recusal would merit that Justice Daniel Ojo would not be able to vote in such a capacity on that case. To me, that's a huge conflict of interest, and I would encourage that justice and the rest of the judicial branch to talk about why, since they are the ones directly tasked in the Constitution with dealing with conflict of interest, they fail to acknowledge and realize that that is a huge conflict of interest. They can respond as they will later or not if they don't think that they need to, but I just think that there's a certain level of hypocrisy involved when you say that you cannot meet, even though we tried our best to give as much notice as possible to the campus. We notified the Highlander as soon as we knew. We tried to share it as much with the campus, but somehow the justices think that it's appropriate for them to meet in the middle of the night, apparently, to come up with a bogus decision on this meeting and do it in a way that's, first of all, unethical and also, I would say, unconstitutional. And so, along with that, I would also like to talk about the hypocrisy involved with the actions that the president portrayed when he sent out that email exclusively to certain members of ASUCR. I would ask you all to recall last year's elections when we had to hold an emergency Senate meeting in the same way that we are doing so this year. However, President Nafi Karim and Executive Vice President Michael Irvin and even Senator Fabian Escobedo, those who have voiced opposition to what is going on, they did not do this last year. And there's a very clear reason as to why they didn't do this last year, why they didn't say all this, why now they think it's appropriate to bring these up. And that's because they were running in those elections. Executive Vice President Michael Irvin and President Nafi Karim, including myself, were among 5 senators that called that emergency meeting. We believe that the Senate had the authority to do so, and the Executive Vice President of that time had enough conscience of mind to be able to do it, and to do it. So, when I found out that there were documents leaked, and last year we had purposely berated the elections director, Chris Sanchez, for leaking documents, that to me shows just, first of all, it's a huge show of hypocrisy, but second of all, it shows me that everything that's being done by the Executive Vice President, the President, and I would even argue today that the Judicial Council is based upon their own conflict, their own interests, and I would question underlying interests that are involved, particularly with elections. So, with that being said, I will talk about the executive order. I think it's incredibly important for the Senate to override this executive order today. In the executive order clause, it says that the president can issue these for urgent and necessary matters as to the function of the ASUCR until Senate can meet again. What that section implies is that Senate, sometimes it's not possible for Senate to make decisions that are related to the functioning of AS because obviously we don't meet as regularly as, for example, the president could just issue an executive order. However, to me, it's unclear how the executive order even applies in this circumstance because Senate is the body that actually made the decision that the president is questioning. So it's the case that the bylaws only include that provision so that Senate can, in cases when Senate cannot decide on these matters, why is it that it's being used for a matter that Senate effectively already decided? Second of all, every hearing that was held during your Senate meeting last week was constitutional. During the hearings, I would say nobody, not even the justices themselves that were there, questioned the legitimacy of the hearing. I would remind you, and I would encourage you to go back to the videotape where ex-Chief Justice Melina Reyes specifically said that she understood the interpretation that the Senate was having and that first of all, she didn't disagree with it, and second of all, she didn't have the authority to disagree with it. Judicial Council didn't have the authority to disagree with it, because that specific section of the Constitution says that the Senate has the sole right to interpret it. Why is this the case? Because obviously the justices are not going to interpret a removal section in their Constitution in a way that doesn't favor them. That's only logical. And so, that to me, I think in and of itself warrants enough of a case for Senate to override this decision, and I would encourage you to do that. I would also encourage Senate to begin thinking more critically about what we can do forward in order to prevent conflict of interest from taking place. So what I will say is that, to me, there is a very clear connection when justices are shown, the Judicial Council is without a doubt shown to have leaked some information. Who that was from is not entirely sure, we're not entirely certain of, but there was definitely a leak. We know that there was one candidate who had specific contact with only 2 specific members of the Judicial Council. The Chief Justice makes sense. Justice Daniel Ojo does not make sense, because why would the candidate reach out to one random individual on the judicial branch if they did not feel like they had a special connection or a special ability to talk to that individual that other candidates didn't have, or that they would otherwise not have with other members of the Judicial Council? Even though we cannot definitively prove that there is some coordination going on with the judicial branch and the president and the executive vice president, I think with the information that we have available, I would argue that it is very clear that the executive vice president, the president, and the Judicial Council are conspiring to purposely violate the ASUCR Constitution, and they're using their authorities in abusive ways, because they know that traditionally, whatever the President and Executive Cabinet says, the Senate can just get walked all over. All of a sudden, yesterday, the Executive Vice President was trying to say that he had, in and of his own authority, the right to nullify and void the decision that was made by the Senate, when the Senate is the body that's specifically elected by the student body to legislate on matters like this. The Judicial Council does not even, in their powers in the Constitution, have authority over elections, whereas the Senate specifically is given authority over elections, and the Senate has prescribed that power to the Elections Committee. I want to talk more about what I think is going on in a larger scale before we vote. So, the president of ASUCR has made it very clear that he is in support of one of the parties that's running. I won't mention parties and names because obviously I can't do that. But the president of ASUCR has made it very clear that he is supporting one of the parties. I have personally witnessed the president giving advice and hearing and supporting one of the parties, right? The executive vice president is also running in a party, and that same party for which the president is supporting. Also, the information that was leaked before the hearings was to a specific party. Also, we've established thus far, at least from what Justice Daniel Ojo said, that there was a member that was in public comment that was the person that made the complaint. We already know pretty much everyone who was there to make the complaint, and everybody has been able to at least discern who the individual might have been that made the complaint. However, that individual still, again, doesn't acknowledge the conflict of interest that they had throughout the whole meeting in establishing matters with regards to the hearings, and after the meeting to try to impose some authority onto the Senate with regards to that issue. What's most problematic to me is that this whole year we have had so many issues with the executive vice president and the president with relation to transparency and accountability. The president has gone as far as to say that transparency is not the holy grail for student government elections. And everything that has been done throughout this past year, and I would say even more so throughout elections, only further proves that not only does the president not believe that transparency is the holy grail, but that the president doesn't even respect transparency as one value of ASUCR. Moreover, I would question the Judicial Council's effectiveness at this point also. Why is it that it took a hearing to remove 2 justices in order for the justices to begin doing their jobs? There were no violation reports sent out until after the hearing when the justices wanted to act as if they've been doing their job and they've been affected. No, the reason why Chief Justice Melina Reyes was removed was because the justices were not doing their job. And that's clear from the fact that I have multiple accounts of people submitting cases that have not been reviewed, that have not even been informed of review. We had obviously definitive proof that the Senate had not been informed, according to the judicial part of the Constitution, of information that they had to be informed of, that the public wasn't informed of the actions of the Judicial Council. But suddenly, when their own power is seen as being under attack or whatnot, now they want to start acting like they've been doing their jobs, and now they want to begin doing their jobs. To me, that is proof enough that there is a conflict of interest going on, because if you're not using your authority and your power and you're not doing your job until such time that you see yourself threatened by it, that is hugely problematic. If the Senate were to not do anything until somebody tried to take Senate's power away, I guarantee you that the President and Judicial Council would talk about it, but yet they're not talking about that in and of themselves. So I've gone on long enough. I would like to make a motion to override the executive orders issued by the President last night, and I would entertain a second and discussion afterward.
Okay, so since there is a motion and a second, is there a discussion? I can open up a short speakers list if you all would like to discuss, or we can move straight into a vote. Okay, so all those in favor of overriding the executive order? All those opposed and abstain? Okay, by a vote of 8-0-0, this motion passes.
Before we adjourn, I do have some other things, not necessarily related to the executive order. So first off, I want to make an official notice that I am hereby requesting that on Wednesday's next Senate meeting, we have a closed session for Senate in order to consider an act of censure for both the President and the Executive Vice President for abuse of their power in their election duties. So I want to make that formal request now. I'll send that email inviting to the Executive Vice President as well. Hopefully he includes it, maybe not, we don't know. So I want to make that. I also want to make it clear for the galley and the public that from here forward, the Judicial Council is not operating. Any violations must be submitted directly to the Elections Director or the front office. I think it's very important for everyone to be aware of the timelines that are imposed, so I encourage everyone to read the Elections Committee press release that was released yesterday as well, so that you're well aware of the timelines. I wouldn't want anybody to not be able to submit violations or anything like that because you're not aware of the timelines that are established. And so if you have any questions, comments, and concerns about that, I'm sure you can direct them to Stephanie. Other than that, I want to thank all the senators for taking the time to come out here. And I want to tell you that the work that you do, even though it's been undermined by Judicial Council and some members of the executive branch, I want you to know that there are members of the executive branch and there's obviously members of the public that do appreciate the work that you do and respect your authority in ASUCR. So thank you.
Okay, if there are no further comments or anything, I'd like to thank everyone in the galley for coming, the Highlander, and everyone on the horseshoe. Yeah, I'll open it up for public comment if there are any members of the galley that would like to speak on anything that just transpired?
Hi, my name is Beatrice. I just had a question. Due to the fact that judicial made decisions after they had already been impeached, and now that you've stated that they will no longer be making decisions, will Elections Committee go back and review those?
We have asked Judicial Council to release all pending cases because they were not supposed to make any decisions regarding those cases. Verdicts were released yesterday, and I can tell you most of the verdicts should have been released a long time ago. So we will be investigating whether those decisions were made before the removal of the 2 justices or after. And if they were decisions that were made after the removal of the 2 justices, then they are invalid, and the cases will go to the Elections Committee.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so how would this entire decision affect me, the public, and UCR in general?
Can you clarify, like, about how it would affect you? Are you just a member of the public, or is there some special circumstance that we should consider?
I'm just a regular student. I'm just a regular first year here, so I mean, I have no idea what's going on, but I mean, now I kind of want to know why would this affect me in the future.
I believe that it would create a precedent in which the judicial branch and the whole ASUCR in terms of election are unbiased. I believe that it would encourage fair practices. I believe that it would encourage... Huh?
How does it also explain the snapping?
The snapping is just the way that Parliament... Yeah, it's like it's the same as clapping.
It's not as loud.
Yeah, it's not as loud. Okay. But yeah, essentially I would say that this would create a precedent in which the executive branch and other members of associated students can strong-arm the senators. They can strong-arm the elected officials of AS that are supposed to represent the students. They can make decisions post-Senate meetings and try to override what the senators decide. They can interpret the Constitution or bylaws to their own personal agendas. That's how I believe that it will affect this school. It will create an AS that is transparent. You know, we're here in front of the students, in front of the Highlander, in front of you all, answering your questions, trying to make and show everybody what we are doing. We will create a precedent in which the president cannot just selectively email people and then say it's a public email. And that's what I believe it will do. In terms of elections, it will make sure it will maintain the status quo that, you know, Elections Committee gives strikes, and unfortunately there's no longer a check when it comes to judicial. However, we've now, or previously Wednesday, if you were here, noticed that the judicial branch was maybe not disseminating correctly. Maybe there was leaked information going on. Maybe there were things that should not have been happening. And in terms of the school, I think the only thing it directly affects is elections, and it doesn't exactly change anything. However, I do believe we do need to hopefully, appoint another justice, hopefully get the judicial branch back to quorum, and hopefully this time it goes through the processes that it's supposed to go through. Hopefully this time the whole executive cabinet collectively appoints the justice. Hopefully all the senators do know all the information beforehand and don't just see the justices when they come up to the Senate. And if you haven't, if you don't know of all of this, do know that all of our Senate meetings are recorded. Know that there was a Highlander article on that, the appointment of the justices, and this happened midwinter quarter, and I would encourage you to go look at that actually. And I think I've answered part of your question. If there's anybody else in this horseshoe that wants to answer any other part.
Really quick before Abraham, would you mind stating your name just for the purpose of my records?
My name is Luis.
Okay, thank you. Abraham?
Yeah, I just want to clarify on Herman's point. So I will say that as soon as possible, I'm going to be talking with our executive director, Lori, about how we can move forward on searching for new justices to replace the individuals that were already missing, as well as the individuals that were removed from office. For those of you that don't know, the executive cabinet is supposed to nominate justices. This wasn't the procedure followed to nominate the last 2 justices. However, I do think it's incredibly important for Judicial Council to be there. I just know that it's also incredibly important for the Judicial Council that is there to be unbiased and to be fair. And so I'll also talk to the rest of the executive cabinet members on how to move forward so that we can present new justices as soon as possible.
Makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It was asked earlier about the decisions that Judicial already made. If you feel that, if the elections committee feel that some of the decisions made by Judicial were unfair due to the unfair practice that they're already happening, or are you able to overturn some of those, even if they were made?
There's something in the elections code that says you cannot appeal an appeal, for example. So we do not have the authority to overturn anything that the Judicial Council decided prior to their removal. The only thing that we have authority over is after the 2 justices were removed and they did not make quorum. Any decisions that they have made since then are invalid and we get to take over. And as I stated before, I'm still waiting on those cases from Judicial.
Do you know when they're going to give it to you?
We've asked multiple times, but as you can see, there have been many confusing things that have gone on with the executive order. So I believe the Judicial Council was under the impression that they were still operating over the past day, which is incorrect and not true.
Yeah, and with that, I would publicly urge the Judicial Council to begin cooperating. Also because yeah, I think it's incredibly important for them to understand the ramifications that withholding cases can have on elections. I don't think that I think that at this point, those cases are becoming hostages for in order for the justices to maintain their own power, and that to me is incredibly problematic. And so I would strongly encourage the Judicial Council to pass on those cases so that we can resolve election matters in an effective and fair way, and so that everybody has a good amount of time to appeal that they need to and whatnot. If the justices that are remaining care about a fair process, they will do that.
I wanted to additionally add, the Elections Committee already met last night. We're meeting this evening, we're meeting Monday, we're meeting Tuesday. We are taking this very seriously. We're trying to be as efficient as possible. We understand the ramifications and everything, the consequences of everything that's gone on. So we're taking the situation very seriously. But as Abe stated, there's not much we can do when the Judicial Council won't cooperate. But I want you to know that everything we do have control over, the violations that have been submitted to me directly, have already been reviewed.
Let's follow up. So yesterday, I'm assuming they sent out a lot of emails saying people so how can we prove if those decisions were made yesterday or before that? Because I'm assuming they made them yesterday when they met, and nobody knew where exactly they met. So.
Yeah, I don't have any information about when they met yesterday. I know we received an email at 5 in the morning from Judicial Council saying they met last night. I have not seen those minutes. I can tell you I've seen most of the violations in some of the cases that were released yesterday. I have personal knowledge of, so I know that they decided on those prior to the removal of the 2 justices. There were some cases, however, that I'm questioning that I believe should have been pending cases, which would mean that the Elections Committee should be deciding on those, and those are the ones that we're investigating. So because of that, we would like to request documentation of those violations from the Judicial Council. But once again, they have to cooperate and submit them to us.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I had something else to say, but I forgot.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, good morning. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for really representing students and making sure that a couple of people in ASUCR aren't controlling the outcome of elections for 18,000 other students. I really appreciate that. I'm sure a lot of the community, if they knew what was going on, would appreciate that as well. I also have a question. Given that one party in this election has been extremely favored by members of this horseshoe in a way that changes the outcome of elections, I was curious if, other than the ramifications that you all are planning for next Wednesday's Senate meeting, if there will be anything else. And I don't know if that's for Elections Committee or if that's for the horseshoe in general.
No, as much as I understand the issue with that, unfortunately there's not really much that we can do with regards to that. I would encourage members of the Horseshoe that have been engaging that to at least make their support public or announce it in some way or do something to take their conflict of interest more seriously. But ultimately, when it comes down to that, there's not really anything in the elections code or bylaws or otherwise that would say that. So there's not much we can do, at least to my understanding.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the galley that would like to come forward?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Eileen Tovar. I actually have a question for the Elections Committee. You said that you're trying to get the judicial branch to release violations that have been filed. I was wondering, would it be beneficial for you if the people who filed violations resubmitted them directly to you rather than the
I don't necessarily know if that's possible. That question actually came up on Wednesday when we first were dealing with this situation. I don't know if it's possible for violations to be resubmitted because it does state that they have to be submitted within 3 days of the actual incident. Like I said, a lot of the verdicts that were sent out yesterday were decided on prior to the removal of the 2 justices, which would mean that they met quorum and those were valid. The ones that I am unaware of, whether they were pending cases or whether decisions were actually made prior to their removal, that's something that I'm going to be looking for documentation for to determine whether those are valid votes or not. So I don't think that candidates or students can resubmit violations because if it's out of the 3-day period. However, I can promise you that we are trying to handle this situation as efficiently and effectively as possible because today is the last day of voting and we are trying to handle everything accordingly. So we'll do our best.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the galley that would like to come forward? Okay, if not, if there's a motion to adjourn,
A motion to adjourn the meeting.
and is there a second? Seconded by Vice President of Finance Iris J. All those in favor? All those opposed and abstain by voting 9-0-0, the vote passes and meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Let's go.